Imagine climbing a windswept ridge in the Caucasus Mountains. The air is thin, the rocks are sharp, and suddenly, you stumble upon gigantic stone walls, black as volcanic glass, rising out of the earth like the skeleton of some ancient titan. No signs, no tourist information board, just sheer, silent stone. Congratulations. You've just found a piece of Urartu. Never heard of it? Don't worry, you're not alone. Urartu is that one ancient civilization history quietly ghosted. Egypt got Hollywood movies. Babylon got hanging gardens. Assyria got all the scary war murals. Urartu, they got giant stone fortresses and a who from most people. But here's the twist. For about 300 years, Urartu was the terror of the mountains, a rival to Assyria itself. They commanded the highlands of Armenia, carved entire cities into cliffs, and built fortresses that still stand today. And yet, poof, they disappeared, leaving behind nothing but ruins, broken inscriptions, and a lot of questions. Who were they? How did they live? Why did they vanish? And, most importantly, why does their name sound like a Dungeons & Dragons campaign? Today, we're diving into the story of Urartu, a mysterious mountain empire with gods of war, megalithic fortresses, suspiciously advanced plumbing, and a downfall that reads like a bad Netflix finale. So, grab your climbing rope, sharpen your bronze sword, and watch your step. We're heading into the highlands. Our story begins around the 9th century BCE, near the shores of Lake Van in what is now eastern Turkey. This region is like the crossroads of civilizations. Mesopotamia to the south, Anatolia to the west, Persia to the east, and the Caucasus looming in the north. In other words, the perfect spot if you want to start a civilization, or get invaded every other Tuesday. The people of Urartu didn't just pop out of nowhere. They descended from the Hurrian tribes, mysterious folks who'd been hanging around the Near East since forever. Think of them as that old band that nobody remembers until you realize half the new music is sampling them. Urartu basically took Hurrian culture, added some military spice, and built themselves into a state. And oh, what a state it was. Urartu had a talent for uniting mountain tribes under one banner. A bit like trying to get your entire extended family to agree on one restaurant. The trick? A mix of religion, iron, and sheer intimidation. The kings of Urartu ruled not only as monarchs but as chosen servants of Haldi, the supreme war god. Picture a divine mascot who basically screamed, "Conquer or else." Haldi had temples, altars, and enough sacrifices to make the neighbors nervous. Alongside him were Tesheba, storm god, and Shavini, sun god, forming a cosmic trio of destruction, thunder, and blinding light. From their capital at Tushpa, perched high above Lake Van, Urartian kings like Menua and Argishti, I set about building a kingdom of fortresses, canals, and terror campaigns. But here's the kicker. They didn't just build fortresses for defense. They built them everywhere, like Starbucks locations. Each fortress wasn't just a military outpost, but a symbol of dominance. Standing on a hilltop, stone walls gleaming in the sun, they screamed, "We own this land. Also, don't even think about messing with us." And to power all this construction, Urartu tapped into the mountain's riches: copper, iron, silver, and timber. They became masters of metalwork, casting helmets, armor, and weapons so shiny that Assyrian scribes complained about them in royal inscriptions. So, while Assyria was busy carving bloody murals of kings stabbing lions, Urartu was quietly flexing. Yeah, we've got fortresses. Come at us, bro. Let's step inside the walls of Urartu. What was daily life like in this mountain fortress empire? First, the social pyramid. At the top, the king, chosen by Haldi, commander of armies, and owner of every cool fortress view. Below him, the nobility, military chiefs, and priests. These were the people who dined on the best lamb stew, drank from bronze goblets, and commissioned inscriptions bragging about how awesome they were. Then came the farmers, herders, and artisans. The backbone of the state. They cultivated wheat and barley on terraced fields, herded goats and sheep, and crafted pottery and textiles. And finally, at the bottom, the enslaved and captured prisoners, who did the unglamorous work of hauling stones, digging canals, and probably asking themselves why they had to be born near Urartu's borders. Now, Urartu's greatest achievement wasn't just its fortresses. It was its plumbing. Yes, you heard that right. The kings of Urartu engineered massive irrigation systems, building canals that stretched for miles through rugged terrain. The Menua Canal, for example, carried water from the mountains straight into Tushpa. And here's the plot twist. Parts of that canal are still functioning today, almost 3,000 years later. Take that, modern infrastructure. And while the farmers watered their crops, Urartian craftsmen were busy producing bronze masterpieces, helmets engraved with lions and bulls, shields embossed with gods, and cauldrons decorated with winged creatures. If you think IKEA flat-pack furniture is impressive, imagine handcrafting a bronze altar while your neighbor Assyria is threatening to burn down your village. Religion, of course, was the glue. The temples of Haldi were the beating heart of the fortresses. Worship meant sacrifice of animals, grain, wine, and sometimes prisoners. The gods of Urartu were demanding, but in return, they kept the kingdom's enemies, hopefully, at bay. In short, life in Urartu was a mix of military discipline, divine fear, and surprisingly good plumbing. Now we arrive at the real showstopper, the fortresses of Urartu. Picture this. You're an Assyrian general marching north, feeling pretty confident. Suddenly you round a hill, and there it is. A fortress perched on a mountain, walls of black basalt stone stacked so perfectly it looks like they've been laser cut. The walls are 20 feet thick. The gates are ironclad, and the whole thing is glaring down at you like a stone-faced bouncer. That was Urartu's strategy, intimidation through architecture. These fortresses, Erebuni, Argishti-Hinili, Tushpa, weren't just castles. They were entire military administrative centers. Inside the walls, palaces, temples, armories, storerooms, and giant wine cellars. Yes, wine cellars. Archaeologists found massive clay jars that once held thousands of liters of wine. Apparently, Urartian kings knew the importance of morale. Erebuni, built around 782 BCE, is one of the most famous. Perched near modern-day Yerevan, it was founded by King Argishti-Virtus. The name means victory because subtlety was not their strong suit. Its walls were painted with murals of gods and warriors, its storerooms stuffed with grain and wine, its temple dedicated to Haldi looming above everything. And here's the mystery. These fortresses were so overbuilt, so durable, that many still stand in ruins today, thousands of years later. Meanwhile, half the buildings from the 1970s can't survive a rainstorm. The fortresses of Urartu are why historians call it an empire of stone. But it wasn't just about defense. Each fortress anchored a network of villages and farms, like the hub of a wheel. They symbolized Urartu's ability to organize and dominate, even in the roughest terrain. Of course, this military-industrial complex had one problem. It painted a giant target on their backs. Here's where the story gets messy. For centuries, Urartu's biggest frenemy was Assyria. The two fought back and forth, raiding each other's lands, torching each other's villages, and basically reenacting an ancient version of, "I don't like you, but I respect you." Sometimes Urartu even managed to push Assyria back. Other times, Assyria burned Urartian fortresses to the ground. But while Assyria was the main problem, the real killers of Urartu came from elsewhere. First, the Scythians. Nomadic horse archers from the steppes. Imagine Mongols with more tattoos and less PR. They swept down from the north, raiding and pillaging. Then came the Medes, an Iranian people rising in power. Between the nomads and the Medes, Urartu was squeezed like a grape. By the 6th century BCE, the fortresses were abandoned. The inscriptions stopped. The kings vanished from the record. Urartu had collapsed, leaving nothing but ruins on the mountainsides. And then, something curious happened. On the same land, a new kingdom rose, Armenia. Many historians believe Armenia inherited not just Urartu's territory, but also its traditions, fortresses, and maybe even some of its people. In fact, the capital Erebuni is considered the ancestor of Yerevan, the modern Armenian capital. Which means, when you sip coffee in Yerevan today, you're sitting on Urartian foundations. Talk about a long legacy. So what do we make of Urartu? They were mountain lords who built fortresses so tough they outlived their entire civilization. They engineered canals that still flow today. They clashed with Assyria, defied empires, and left behind wine jars big enough for a college frat party. And yet, they slipped through history's cracks. Why? Maybe because Assyria wrote most of the records, and they weren't exactly eager to hype up their rivals. Maybe because Urartu didn't leave us grand mythologies or epics, just stone inscriptions about which king built which wall. Or maybe it's because they were simply swallowed by the next chapter of history. Absorbed into the rise of Armenia, their memory blurred into legend. But walk among their ruins today. The towering walls of Erebuni, the silent stones of Tushpa, the channels of the Menua Canal still carrying mountain water. And you feel it. A whisper from the past. The echo of a forgotten kingdom that once defied the greatest empires of its age. Urartu may be gone, but their stones still stand, silent sentinels on the mountain peaks, daring history to remember their name.